What is going on, horror fanatics? Zomboy here, and you're watching Twisted Terrors. On this episode, we're going to be talking about... Boy! What was that? Whoa! We're going to be talking about Phantasm. 1979's Phantasm. This movie's rated R, comes in an hour and 29 minutes. This movie was directed by Don Coscarelli. This movie's interesting. I really feel like people love this movie or they hate this movie. Not a lot of in between. I have a lot of friends that physically hate this movie. I'll tell you what I think afterwards, but yeah. So this movie is rated R. The original cut on this movie was rated X due to one man that dies and pees himself, and for the some of the severe deaths. And they had to do some severe cutting on this movie before it got a rated R. This movie is casting Michael Baldwin as Mike, Bill Thornberry as Jody, Reggie Bannister as Reggie, Angus Scrim as the Tall Man, and Kathy Lester as the Lady in Lavender. IMDb has this one rated 6.6 out of 10. Letterboxd has this one rated as a 3.3 out of 5. So a pretty good score if you ask me. So this movie starts off with a man and a woman. They are having relations in a cemetery before the woman pulls a dagger out and stabs the man to death. Movie cuts to a funeral. You meet Reggie and Jody. They're bandmates of the guy that passed away, and they are saying their final goodbyes to their friend that has died. You meet Mike, who is Jody's brother, who's hiding in the bushes because he was told not to come to the funeral. And so he's way off in the background with some binoculars watching this funeral. They lower the guy into the ground. Everyone leaves, and Mike stays and end up seeing the Tall Man for the first time after a group of, I think it took 6 people to move this casket with their friend out to the gravesite. The Tall Man picks it up, no problem, and ends up putting it right into the hearse. The scene where he does this, obviously, this is showing that it took 6 grown men to haul this thing, and the Tall Man could pick it up all by himself. They made a duplicate empty casket out of balsa wood to make it a lot easier to pick up for that scene. Jody goes to the bar, and he meets a lady there, and she's hitting on him pretty hard, and they end up going to the cemetery together. And little did Jody know, Mike's following him from a distance, just watching to see what he's doing, and he starts having relations with this lady, which you quickly realize is the same lady as in the beginning of the movie that end up killing Tommy. As Mike's watching, you can tell, I think she pulls the dagger out again, but then Mike is kind of attacked by a dwarf, and he ends up getting up and running, which then Jody sees him running and tells him that's his brother, and ends up running after him, and finally gets him calmed down. When they come back, the lady in lavender is gone, which, Jody is a little upset about that, but little did he know Mike just saved his life. He was gonna get stabbed to death. So Mike ends up going back into the funeral home. He basically breaks into the funeral home and is trying to see what's going on. As he's hiding in a casket, one of the grounds crew almost finds him, but ends up not. As he's investigating the hallways in this mausoleum, the caretaker ends up finding him, and they're kind of wrestling in this. You get to see these orbs for the first time, and this orb's flying through the air, and it's got these blades that retract, and it's going straight for Mike. and it ends up going into the groundskeeper's head, and then this drill bit comes out and it goes into his head, and it just basically sucks all the blood out of him, and he's squirting it out of the ball out of the other side. So it's a super gruesome death. Really good. And the tall man comes out and sees Mike. He's running after him through the funeral home, and Mike goes into the basement and slams the door real hard, and then he noticed the tall man's fingers are stuck in the door, and he takes a knife and ends up cutting his fingers off. And he keeps one of the fingers as a keepsake for some reason. He takes it with him, ends up going home and telling his brother Jody all about it, and Jody doesn't believe him and think he's full of it until he shows him the box. Jody opens the box, and inside there's a finger still moving. Jody's planning on going to the funeral home, and they end up opening the box to look at the finger, and the finger's no longer in there. Instead, it's this flying giant dagger-teethed fly thing, which ends up going after them, and they have to struggle to get it into the sink to put it down the disposal, which is a good scene. And then Jody plans on going to the funeral home to check things out after finding out that Mike had broken a window out and which window it was. So when Mike goes back to investigate, he finds the window open, crawls in the window, and right away he is attacked by a dwarf monk in a robe. And there's a fight scene between those two before Mike ends up shooting it a whole bunch of times and crawling back out of the window. And as Mike's leaving in his Hemi-Cuda muscle car, big block, the tall man's chasing after him in his hearse, and they're having a car chase, and the tall man ends up crashing the car. And when Mike parks to get out to go investigate who was driving the hearse, he opens the door, and it's one of the dwarf monks. And he ends up pulling its hood back. It is his friend Tommy that the funeral was for, but he's been shrunk down. And so now he realizes that he is stealing bodies and turning them into these monk creatures, these dwarf monks. So when Mike gets home, he's telling Reggie and Mike all about what happened, and tells Reggie to take Mike to their aunt's house to go stay so they can go back and deal with this tall man at the funeral home. And so Reggie in this movie is driving around in a giant old ice cream truck. And at this point, they'd taken their friend Tommy, which is now a dwarf monk, and they'd put it into his ice cream truck to cool. And so in this scene, he's driving him to his aunt's, and he drops him off at his aunt's antique store, and he's looking around the store and finds an old piece of furniture that had a whole bunch of pictures in them. And he's going through them, he finds this old vintage picture of the funeral home with the tall man in a horse and carriage. So the photo looks, hundreds of years old. And so at this point now they're telling you that the tall man never dies. He's immortal. He's been around for a long time, doing this for a very long time, apparently never getting caught. And he ends up telling his aunt he needs to go home right away because he needs to tell Mike about this, and talks his aunt into taking him. So they're driving back, and they end up finding the ice cream truck flipped upside down, and Reggie's missing, and the back door's been knocked off. So he realizes the dwarf monk came to life and attacked Reggie, and Reggie's gone. And all of a sudden they're attacked by the monk dwarf, which ends up crashing inside the car, and Mike goes flying out the back window as his aunt drives away with this dwarf in the car, and she goes missing as well. Mike goes home and basically tells his brother Jody that Reggie's dead and their aunt is dead, and it was the dwarf monk that did it. And Jody ends up locking Mike in his room with a screwdriver and grabbing guns to go after the tall man to get back at him for killing his friends. Mike is trying to get out of his room because he wants to help Jody, and ends up coming up with the idea of taking a shotgun shell, which he had in his pocket, and pushing a tack into the back of the shell and taping it to a hammer, and then he hits the hammer on the door, which blows this giant hole in the door, and he's able to pull the screwdriver out and get out that way. After he gets out of his room, the tall man is standing outside of his house and abducts him by throwing him in the back of the hearse. And he's speeding his way to the funeral home when Mike ends up jumping out the back window, which causes the tall man to not pay attention. He crashes the car and the whole thing explodes. Again, there's a lot of people that die in this movie that come back. There's Jody's at the funeral home, and he's got an orb going after him. Mike ends up showing up and saving him from this orb. I think he shoots it out of the air with a gun. And then all of a sudden, Reggie shows up.
Oh, that's the door.
Hey man, I don't know. Hey! Hi guys.
Reg, he ain't dead.
No, I ain't 3'2" yet either.
So you got Mike, Jody, and Reggie, and they go down to this door, and they open the door, and it's this bright white room full of these black drums with these little windows in them. And when Reggie looks in, he realizes that they're all those dwarf monks in all the tanks. And then against the back wall, there's these two metal pylons sticking out of the ground that are making this humming noise. And when Mike goes over, he reaches through them, and his arm disappears, and he's able to pull it back through. So it's like a door to another realm, and he ends up getting sucked into it. And he's looking, and he's on another planet, and there's a whole bunch of these dwarves and tanks, and he realizes real quickly that the dwarves are like slaves on this planet.
They're slaves. The dwarves. And they gotta crush them because of the gravity and the heat.
Jody ends up pulling him back through, so he's in the room again, and he's explaining that he knows what's happening. The tall man is abducting bodies from Earth, putting them in these tanks, and sending them through this doorway to this other planet, which shrinks them down because there's a lot of gravity there, and the planet uses them as slaves. And that's when you finally find out what these space dwarf monks are. Being a musician, Reggie quickly realizes that this doorway is acting like a tuning fork, and that's why it's making this humming noise. So he ends up walking up to, and he puts both hands on top of each one, which knocks him way back, but it stops the vibration and basically kind of disrupts the doorway. And then all chaos breaks loose. You got the tall man chasing him. Reggie ends up getting stabbed in the chest by the lavender lady, which you finally realize is the tall man. The tall man can transform into this lady in lavender, basically to seduce men and kill them so he can have extra bodies as well. So the tall man, it seems like he can transform. He can get into your head. You know, people are always having dreams and thoughts about the tall man into this, so you really think that he's got like some supernatural powers, that once he kind of gets a hold of you, he's in your head as well. And then he's able to control these balls, these orbs as well, that are flying around. They're kind of like his little minions as well, flying around, keeping his funeral home safe from people up to no good. Or I guess they're up to good. He's up to no good. Jody comes up with an idea that there's an old mine, and he wants to lure the tall man up to the old mine because it's like 300 feet deep, and he wants to go up there. So he tells Mike to go home and that they will lure him up to this mine, but he wants to go take the signs down and disguise it. As Jody races his Hemi-Cuda up that way, Mike goes home and instantly runs into the tall man, who starts chasing him. So he lures him all the way up to the mine, where when he gets up there, you realize the signs have been removed, and then Jody had put like a sheet over the opening with some rocks and dirt. And so Mike jumps over because he knows about it. The tall man falls into the hole, down into the mine, and then Jody pushes these giant boulders down from the hillside, which roll all the way down the hillside, down into the mine and block the hole. Mind you, some of these boulders would probably weigh about 7,000 pounds. So I'm not sure how he moved them, but he did. So he did a good job. And then the movie cuts to Mike. He wakes up and he's talking to Reggie, who's not dead, and talking about how the tall man took all his family. And Reggie's telling him that was all a dream and that his brother died in a car wreck. So you find out that Jody is no longer with us. You don't see that, but they tell you he died. But Reggie's telling him it was all in your dreams. And I think at this point Reggie tells him he's gonna raise him since he lost his parents and now his brother's dead. But the first thing they need to do is pack some bags because they're gonna go on a road trip and just get away for a while. Reggie's getting the car ready while Mike goes upstairs, starts packing a bag, and then you can see in the mirror the tall man is standing behind him. And he turns to see the tall man. A boy. And then hands of the dwarfs burst through the mirror from the other side and pull him in. And that's the end of Phantasm. I like this movie. You know, I think one of the reasons I like this movie is it's one of those ones that plays like on repeat near Halloween. So, I mean, as far back as I can remember, even as a kid, it was just always on. So it was something that I would always watch. And the story is weird because, you know, you have dream sequences, you have almost like some telepathy, you have space monks, you have a man that can been around for hundreds of years that are sending bodies to space to become slaves and can control balls. And death is always weird in this one. You know, you think someone's dead and then they're back, and then someone else dies and they're back. So it's a little convoluted, but for me, I like the tall man. I think he's cool. I like the character. I like the monks. The balls are sweet. You know, there's a lot to this movie that it leaves you with a lot of questions. I think that's why people don't like it, because they go in so many different places and they don't just stick to one thing. They do a lot of things. And so for me, it hits more than misses. So I enjoy it. Is it perfect? Definitely not. Some fun facts on this one. The mansion used for like the funeral home and stuff like that was also in James Bond, A View to Kill. It's featured in that movie. Another one, Reggie actually worked for a Morningside funeral home before this movie was shot. You know, when he was an upcoming actor and he needed work in between acting jobs, he actually did floral arrangements there for the mausoleum and graves and things like that. Yeah, it's a fun movie. It's one that has a lot of nostalgia, and it actually opened an entire franchise of movies. I think there's like 5 of these movies. They get pretty ridiculous further on. Reggie is in pretty much the rest of them. He takes this movie and carries it all the way to the end. So I give it to him. But it's a fun movie, but you got to take it with a grain of salt and go in with an open mind and just be ready for a lot of craziness. But it's gory, you know, the space monks are crazy, but they look cool. You know, the practical effects are good. So there's a lot of good stuff to this movie. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Like I said, I think there's like 4 more of these. I appreciate watching this video. Hit the like, subscribe button, and I will see you on the next one. Zomboy says, watch Phantasm. And I'll see you on the next one. All right, bye.